Hi folks, how are we doing? I'm the Reverend Danny Crosby, Unitarian minister serving congregations in Altrincham and in Urmston in the northwest of England. I hope you're finding the love and you're witnessing the blessings that are there in life in these difficult times. It's hard at times, my friend, I know, but we're all in this one together. So I'm offering these devotions as my little bit of hope, doing what I can, playing my role, being a part of the solution. These devotions are offered as a balm for the heart, the mind, the spirit and the soul. And the title for today's reflection is Being Right Enough to Be Wrong. So I invite us just to still ourselves now in silence. Let's invite a loving presence to be here amongst us and to awaken from deep, deep within us. I've lit this flame of freedom in the cup of belonging, acceptance and love. Welcome. Know that you are welcome. Welcome in the spirit of love, in the spirit of openness, in the spirit of reverence. In this time and in this space, may we revere God, revere life, revere one another. In this time and space, may we find peace, rest, comfort and challenge. In this time and space, may we find community and meaning. May we know that we are loved, accepted and encouraged to be all that we were born to be. You are welcome. You are welcome as you are, exactly as you are this moment, without apology. Be all that you were born to be. Welcome in the spirit of love. I recently read a wonderful, wonderful book, Humankind, A Hopeful History by Rutger Bregman. The book does a great job of questioning a great deal of what is considered to be the truth about the human condition. And the book ends with the following 4 paragraphs. If there is one thing I've sought to do with this book, it's to change the meaning of the word realism. Isn't it telling that in modern usage, the realist has become synonymous with the cynic, for someone with a pessimistic outlook? In truth, it's the cynic who is out of touch. In truth, we're living on planet A, where people are deeply inclined to be good to one another. So, be realistic. Be courageous. Be true to your nature and offer your trust. Do good in broad daylight and don't be ashamed of your generosity. You may be dismissed as gullible and naive at first, but remember, what's naive may be common sense tomorrow. It's time for a new realism. It's time for a new view of humankind. It is a wonderful book and I highly, highly recommend it. Read it, but do so critically. Its strength is in questioning so many things that we just hold true. I particularly like the way it questioned many findings from psychological studies that took place during the 20th century. It seems that the findings and the methodology adapted at the time were not as honest as it was claimed to be at the time. In fact, it would appear there was a lot of dishonesty in attempts to promote a particular point of view about human nature, a negative, fear-based view, perhaps to shape public policy. This all got me thinking about the nature of truth. The truths that we believe about ourselves, about one another, and life in general. There are many things that we hold true without really questioning them. Why do we do this? It also got me thinking about who we trust for our truth. What are our sources? And this seems particularly critical in the time that we find ourselves in right now. Who do we trust in this time of crisis? What should we do? Who should we believe? Do we trust ourselves? I suspect that the view we have of others will impact on the view that we have of ourselves and of all life, actually. Not that I'm blaming the sources of truth entirely, because if I've learned anything in life, I have learned that the news that we absorbed is usually taken in not to inform us actually, but to already just to prove our preconceived points of view. Now interestingly, Bregman suggests that we ought to give up on the news. Not on good journalism. No, he's a journalist himself, he's in favour of good journalism. But giving up on the daily constant intake of news. It's usually all negative anyway. Now Jesus said in John's Gospel, "Ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free." But do we want to be free though? Do we want to be responsible for our own truth? Isn't it easier to simply blame someone else when things go wrong? Do we really want the freedom of responsibility that comes with seeking our own truth, with getting things wrong actually? For one to truly be the seeker of the truth, perhaps the most important thing to possess is the capacity to see, admit and rectify when we are wrong. Because we're all wrong at times. I think the greatest gift that life can give is the sense that you are right enough within yourself to admit when you are wrong. Some people can't, you know. And I think it says a lot. As I like to repeat, as I once read on the door of my college principal when I was training for the ministry, it said it as we walked in. I have learnt so much from my mistakes that I think I'm going to make some more. There you go. I'll be learning a lot more, no doubt. But how many of us feel secure enough in our own humanity to admit we have been wrong about deeply held beliefs at times? Again, this is wonderfully exemplified in Bregman's Humankind. He admits himself that he has lived with many of the assumptions about human history that most of us believe seemingly without question. Well, kudos to him. He's obviously right enough to be wrong. Truth and trust seem pretty critical at this time as we begin to return to some kind of normality after the shutdown measures are easing all the time. Do we trust what we are being told? What should we do ourselves about opening our worship spaces safely as they're now allowed to be open? Do we trust the advice that the government are offering, that the health advisors are offering? Well, there seems to be a growing divide. Recent analysis by New King's College London has found that public opinion has been divided primarily into three distinct groups. The trusting, which is about 38% of the population, the dissenting, another 38% of the population, and the frustrated, which is about 24% of the population. It found that while worried about the health impact of the coronavirus crisis, the trusting are generally supportive of the government's approach to opening up the economy in the way they are doing so. Meanwhile, the dissenting group worry more about the health impact and believe that we're opening up far too quickly. The frustrated, they just want it all over and quickly, soon as possible. They're less worried about health impact and more concerned about the economic implications of all this. Professor Bobby Duffy, director of the Policy Institute at King's College London, said of the findings, "We went into lockdown incredibly unified, with 9 in 10 of the public supporting the measures, but we're becoming more and more divided on the way out. In particular, our views are now aligning much more clearly with our underlying political identities. The trusting group, for example, have just as high fears about the direct health risk as the dissenting group, but they have utterly different views of the government's response. The trusting are putting their faith in the government. The dissenting, very clearly, are not, with only 4% thinking the government has done a good job." But these two groups are not entirely aligned to party support. Nearly 1 in 5 of the dissenting group are Conservative voters, showing how important perceptions of the virus response are likely to be in ongoing political support. The frustrated are quite different, with a much clearer view that we're relaxing the restrictions too slowly. This seems to be driven by a much greater focus on the economic impacts, and in turn a high number of this group are already suffering from financial and other impacts from the lockdown. And then of course there are those who claim that the whole crisis is just a hoax. They don't believe in any of this. They claim other sources of truth and are unwavering in their criticism. They're not frustrated. They completely deny that this COVID crisis exists at all, and it's just some kind of plot against humanity. So who do we believe? Who do we trust? What is true? Where do we get our truth from? And having found the truth, how do we act? Has your view changed over time? Well, as I look back, I can see that mine has. I now feel that we did not act early and decisively enough. Those first few weeks, we were too slow to act. And facts and figures do seem to show this to be true. The death rate here is higher than it could have been, than it ought to have been perhaps, especially when we look at our near neighbours. But that's just my view, and it's a view that is always changing. But what about truth in general? Truth itself is an interesting word. It comes from a Germanic root which also gives rise to another word, troth. As the vow of old, I pledge thee my troth. A word used as people enter a covenant with one another. As Parker J. Palmer put it, a pledge to engage in mutually accountable and transforming relationship. To know in truth is to become betrothed, to engage the known with the one's whole self. To know in truth is to be known as well. Truth then is a pledge that's made between people. It is relational in nature, a covenant of trust. So who do we trust? Who do we covenant with? What is the truth? Now, interestingly, at the end of the year 2016, the Oxford Dictionaries announced that they had chosen post-truth as the word of the year, offering as a definition circumstances in which objective facts are less influential in shaping public opinion than appeals to emotional and personal belief. The Oxford Dictionary's Casper Grafwall said post-truth could become one of the defining words of our time. Now, this was in response to a particularly tumultuous time politically, both here in the UK and of course in the United States of America. And I suspect things have become more so ever since. Partisanship has grown, with all sides claiming that the others are engaging in Orwellian doublethink, and that the organism of the state is working against them. And it's not a left issue against right or a right against left. They all seem to be saying it. It seems to be even worse when it comes to social media, when all you need is a camera, a computer and a YouTube channel, and suddenly you can become an expert on what the real truth is. I, as you can tell because you're watching it, I have a YouTube channel, but I would not listen to me unquestioningly. I constantly get things wrong, but at least I can admit when I'm wrong. I'm wrong all the blooming time, I can assure you. I find it very hard to trust a person who can never admit to being wrong about anything and would lie just to protect themselves and their position, and of course blame others. Now, truth of course is subjective. Mahatma Gandhi said, what may appear as truth to one person will often appear as untruth to another person, but that need not worry the seeker. Where there is an honest effort, it will be realised that what appears to be different truths are like the countless and apparently different leaves of the same tree. Different parts of the same elephant, different leaves on the same tree, different paths up the same mountain, different windows open to the same light, one truth, many manifestations. So we may see the same thing and yet still come to completely different conclusions about what we see. This may be because we are approaching the truth differently. We bring our own needs and our own biases. It's vital to recognise this. This, though, does not mean that the one drawing a different conclusion has bad intent. Quite the opposite, actually. This is true of people and of all life, for that matter, and always has been. It doesn't have to be about bad intent, it's just a different conclusion. To quote the philosopher of science Karl Popper, all things living are in search of a better world. Men, animals, plants, even unicellular organisms are constantly active. They are trying to improve their situation, or at least to avoid its deterioration. Popper argued that because the identification of error is so central to the problem-solving process, therefore its corrective, the truth is a core component of our quest for betterment. Mistakes are constantly made. All life makes mistakes. No one has absolute foresight, can see what is coming. This is particularly true in our unprecedented times. That said, to maintain trust, it is vital to admit when one is wrong and to rectify the error. It was reassuring to hear a little while ago those leading Sweden's approach to the crisis, that they were enlightened enough to admit that they had made mistakes in their approach to the current crisis, that too many people had died, especially in their care homes. Now this, I suspect, is vital as they move forward and attempt to maintain their covenant of trust with their people. To trust is to accept that we are vulnerable and that we are trying to find a way through this. We need to maintain trust in each other and in ourselves. Therefore, it is vital that we are able to admit when we make mistakes. We need to be right enough in ourselves to admit when we're wrong. So often we see our piece of truth as a rock that we must cling to, that is absolute and must not be questioned. This often leads to disputes as people find that in order to hold on to their truth, such reasoning lacks humility, because the truth is that whatever we believe or disbelieve about truth, we never see the whole truth completely. Instead, we merely glimpse at the truth, or even a piece of the truth. Who can honestly say that they know the whole truth and nothing but the truth about anything? I suppose some say it, that they claim they know the whole truth about everything, that they're an expert at everything. And I will be very wary about trusting anybody who speaks in such a way. Just because someone says it doesn't make it true. This brings to mind a little snippet from Auntie DeMello's 1 Minute Wisdom. To a visitor who described himself as a seeker after the truth, the teacher said, "If what you seek is truth, there is one thing you must have above all else." "I know," answered the student, "an overwhelming passion for it." "No," said the teacher, "an unremitting readiness to admit that you might be wrong." That you might be wrong. To seek the truth, one needs humility and openness, and enough self-esteem to see that we are wrong sometimes, and of course the capacity to admit this. If we cannot, we will not be able to see the truth even when it's right in front of our faces. It's so easy to become blinded by what we think we know. What we need is the openness that comes with true humility, and that's a truth that will set us free. In the Gospel of Thomas, Jesus said, "If you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. If you do not bring forth what is within you, what you do not bring forth will destroy you." While Lao Tzu wrote in the Tao Te Ching, "Knowing others is intelligence. Knowing yourself is true wisdom. Mastering others is strength. Mastering yourself is true power. But you'll never bring forth what is within you while ever you're afraid of what is within you. There have been times when I've been afraid to bring forth what was within me, and I have witnessed that same fear in others too. After all, is it not a little scary to receive our truth from elsewhere rather than to let it come forth from within ourselves? It can appear safer to accept the truth offered to us rather than to seek it ourselves. So often in life we want certainty, absolutes black and white and not 1,000 shades of grey. So often we seek the illusion of certainty. But that just closes us in and it builds the walls and it keeps us from the truth. For the key to truth seeking is openness. Openness born from uncertainty and humility. Openness is a way that enables us to experience new, previously unseen truth, a truth that will set us free. It will allow us to bring forth what is within us, and by doing so we might just uncover what will save us from the delusion of what we think we know about ourselves, one another, and life itself. Do we trust ourselves enough to seek out the truth and therefore to bring forth what is within us? Or we just rather stick with the safety of what we think we already know, of what someone has taught us or told us is the truth? We can trust what we unearth if we learn how to truly love in the questions of our lives and the questions of others' truth claims too. Trust is vital, of course. We have to learn to trust what we discover, what we unearth, whilst not putting a fence around what we see as the truth today. The key is an open attitude, whether that's in finding our own truth or in offering truth to another. Now the challenge, of course, comes in dwelling in the ambiguity of truth without becoming overwhelmed or paralysed by it. The challenge comes in maintaining a deep commitment to the openness that truth-seeking requires and not allowing ourselves to become bogged down by what we think we know, closed in. It's not for the faint-hearted. It takes real courage. It's not the easier path, but it's definitely the path worth taking, for it's the one that will set us up to live in and through truth, that road less travelled by. It's okay to get it wrong, to make mistakes. It's okay to feel lost and confused about life at times. That's what being human's about. There's something beautiful and glorious in that. If you want to be a seeker of the truth, then above everything else, what we need is an unremitting readiness to admit that we might be wrong. Wrong about how we view ourselves, wrong about how we view life, wrong about how we view each other. And the truth is, of course, that once we can see we are wrong about something, admit we are wrong about this something, do whatever we can to put right what was once wrong, then guess what? We're no longer wrong. We're right. The key is to feel right enough in our humanity to be able to admit when we're wrong. To be able to admit we only ever vision a partial truth about anything. And then to be open to the truth of others. The key is to be right enough to be wrong. For this is the essence of the truth. Now I'm going to end this little devotion with some final words of blessing. You know, we need to bless more, and we can all bless. We bless by giving our whole hearts to life. So let's begin right now. Let's give our whole hearts to life. May the Spirit of love open our eyes. May it shine light even upon the darkest of days. May we recognise the sacredness of one another, the sacredness of all life, in all time and in all spaces. And may we experience the thickening of all time so as to know the thin places that connect us to all life. May we bring this sacred vision to life. May we be right enough to be wrong. And may we do so in all that we feel, in all that we think, in all that we say, in all that we do. Amen.